All right, we're in.
We're in now. Getting creative with the technology.
Yay. Okay. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Kiran Patti at Groundswell Healing, and welcome to the second installation of the Season Leader interviews. I'm here with the lovely Vanessa. Actually, I don't know how to say your last name.
Couto.
Couto.
Yeah.
Amazing, brilliant, archetypal astrologer. I love that that's how you speak of yourself. We'll hear more about Vanessa's work at the end of all of this, but I'm excited to just kind of jump in with you, Vanessa. Yeah. So yeah, Vanessa's here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me over. We managed through the technology shenanigans.
We basically had 30 minutes of what felt like Mercury retrograde before we got on this video.
And it's not even shadow yet. Come on, man.
No, it's going on. It's also the world's kind of in motion, in a lot of motion right now. So
yeah,
let's not be surprised. I mean, are we really surprised at the end of the day?
No.
Anyways,
no.
So welcome. I thought, one thing I like to do with all the work that I do is just take a moment to breathe. And I think after our tech snafu, would you be okay with me guiding you and everyone else through a little bit of breathing before we start?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So if you feel called, feel free to close your eyes and just find a comfortable position wherever you're sitting. I'm going to invite us to take 3 full breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. Nice and full on inhale. Audible. One more time. Beautiful. And then just letting our breath settle into a good rhythm that feels good for you at this moment in time. Letting the breath nourish you. And as we're inhaling, just for a few more moments, let's imagine the inhale also calling towards us, the guides, the helpful ancestors, any support from the earth or the stars that you need at this moment in time. Let my ancestors meet your ancestors, so we can all be health together during this conversation. That it's not just information that we're downloading you with, but that, Vanessa, both as we're talking, this conversation can really help us and serve us in how we're being called to show up and be in this time with integrity, and that this conversation can also serve that purpose for all of you who are listening. Thanks for joining in.
Thank you. It's also calling in some rain for the West Coast. Yeah. That's my mandala with all the water droplets.
So I do just want to bring a little bit more of your essence into the space. And so I'm curious, Vanessa, what are some of the ways that you identify that you'd like folks to know and you'd like to share?
Well, I say I'm originally from Brazil, and so I carry a bit of the South American Latin blood, quite a bit. When I did my DNA, I also saw that my ancestors all pretty much came from the Mediterranean. So another layer of Latinist in it. And for those who know astrology, I like to say shorthand, I'm a Gemini. So that should explain a lot of the hand movement. And I do go by she, her as a definition. But I feel like a mixture of North and South. I was raised biculturally and bilingual between Brazil and here. So I traverse the left and right brain, doing the Gemini work of trying to build a bridge. And sometimes I say I'm a cosmic travel guide with my work with astrology.
Thank you. Okay. And then one more piece just to help us frame our conversation today. I know I sent you this question, but I wanted to share it with the group as well. These season leader conversations are really meant to help us figure out and feel how to be both integrity with our own energy as well as the energy of our world right now. Mm-hmm. And so one of the meta questions that these interviews and also the work that I'm ushering in right now delves into into the question, how do we hold our natural rhythms, both of our bodies and of the earth, and as well as how do we hold the cycle of revolution and crisis that's also upon us. Mm-hmm. So I want to share that meta question, but I'd love to, as a gateway into our conversation, ask for both of us, what are some of the other questions that are on your heart right now and that you're holding? And let's see, and just use that to create the container for our conversation.
Well, one of the questions that's been on my mind a lot this year, but especially in those last several days because of the fire, the wildfires, is a question about how I believe that in the work that we do to know who we are and truly are and discover our growing edges and all that is not selfish. It's about a level of service. Know thyself so you can serve better, so you can share your gift better in the world. And I really do think that we are all born as a question of the time we were born. But when we see the enormous amount of unsettling issues, from pandemic to fires to social unrest and all that, at times I find myself, when I'm kind of teetering on despair of like, what does it matter? My inner work is nothing in comparison to acres and acres being burned, just to stay close to what is happening, at least here this week on the West Coast. But I often go back to this question, how does my inner work as a soul, which to me feels like I'm walking, while the chaos, the perceived chaos or the destruction or however it is, seems like it's going by a sports car, like a Corvette flying by while I'm just slowly walking. But I still go back to that I feel like this is one of the dimensions that doesn't get spoken about as much when we see all the experts talking about what needs to happen, right? And part of me, I never hear that the inner work is a prerequisite for us to tackle everything else. So that's what I go back to because it's such an important question for me. It has always guided me in terms of like, well, if I don't know this inner psyche here, how it gets reflected on the sort of as above, so below, as within, so without. How does that? So that's the question that has been really prominent for me this year. Mm-hmm. And how not to allow myself to go into despair, because sometimes in just reading the news, you just want to put your hands up in the to the heavens and like, I give up, you know? So, and I would say in light of the work with leadership, I think that many already have said we're suffering a crisis of leadership, right? We don't really have the leaders that we would like to have right now.
Yeah.
But they're also a reflection, I think, of us. They didn't come from outer space. They came from our society, from our zeitgeist. And so I do feel still that although doing the inner work feels slow at times, it's very cyclical, it goes in spirals, it doesn't move fast like the Corvette driving by, it's still absolutely necessary. Otherwise, I don't think we're ever going to have the leaders we want.
Yeah. I think, as I don't know if you know this about me, but I have 4 Cancer placements in my chart.
Oh, Cancer planets.
Yeah.
I have 4 Gemini.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay. Awesome. You know, with the sun and the moon in Cancer also. So I'm not not like the triple, you know, Cancer, but yeah, sun and moon in Cancer it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I have a Pisces moon, so if that says anything.
Totally. Yeah, I think there's definitely a kindredness there.
I can be like, this is too much.
Well, I think what you're saying resonates so deeply for me, and I would say that the question that you, or the questions, I hear multiple questions inside of what you're saying, and what you're speaking to, I think, is something that I've often felt most of my life, you know, as someone who's been deeply called to service forever, ever since I can remember, even as a young child. And but also having such an intense pull into my internal self.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I feel like I've spent my life really grappling with what is that balance between tending of the self and then tending of the outer world. And I feel you, like, and especially in moments where there is mass crisis and, you know, and especially, I mean, the fire is happening right now. This is, you know, crisis number what? Right?
This year, there's a meme going around that somebody's, you know, writing to the TV rise and says, no, I've watched enough apocalyptic movies to know this is too much. You don't put one on top of the
other. And then, you know, we don't talk also about the fact that we've really been living in fractured waters for a very long time.
Yeah.
It was quiet crisis and trauma in our waters prior, you know, it's like really it's this year is the straw that's breaking the camel back.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I feel you, and I feel this question coming back with like a stronger wave, you know, really asking for attention in a deeper way. Because I also feel that urgency. I feel that intent as someone who, like, I really can't not care here. Like, I have to come from a place of integrity inside to be able to show up well in the world. Why I do the work that I do. It's why I'm, you know, my, like, the season leader cohort and the work I do is so much about centering healing in our leadership, centering strategy. And I continue to ask myself that question though. What is the intersection of the care for the self and the care for our collective, especially at a moment where that collective destruction and need feels so urgent and great?
I have, well, just to paraphrase, my father was a Sagittarius with all the dirty jokes that would go with that. So I grew up around a lot of dirty jokes. And I think, my friends always laugh at me because I compare spiritual development, personal development, a lot with bowel movements, even though I do not like a poop joke. But I've been saying this for a while, that in my classes and such, that the shadow stuff, although there's a lot of gold in the shadow is not necessarily evil, right? But the fact that I think that we don't know ourselves, thus we don't know our own shadow, we project it out. So we keep just flushing it into the collective. Well, the sewage pipe has burst. And now the collective shit, excuse my French, is going everywhere, including in your very clean bathroom. It's coming back. So I still believe that a lot of what's rising is this sort of broken sewage. But still, if we don't, I still believe very firmly, if we don't deal with our shadow, the stuff, our wound, ancestral wound, trauma, you can call it whatever you want to call it, it just gets flushed down to the collective sewage that, as we've seen, broke. And so we're not helping the pressure. And I still think that I will, being Gemini, I will go into this like, oh my God, what is happening? Back to like, okay, focus. You need to do the work, because I don't want to contribute, at least the part that I'm aware of, more into the mess. Just to give an example, that was last week, I felt, I don't do Facebook very much, but I felt sort of like I had to share an article, that I was fuming about. And then I thought, what is it going to contribute to the conversation here? Probably nothing. It's just going to be more shit flung about, right? And so I didn't post it. It was a small little act of like, I can run with my Mars here and go crazy, or I can just wait a second. What do I really want to say about this? And at that moment, I didn't really have anything that would be helpful. So I didn't share. I didn't just keep easily sharing. And I think that we're living in times where the fracture also comes from this, we're just carrying the buckets of shit, just passing it along, and that's why earlier in the year when we had the toilet paper situation, I thought, how symbolic is that everybody's like, toilet paper, right? Because of the shit. I was like, oh, that is so classic. So
totally. I know. I think I'm only going to use one slice of toilet paper per visit. Because I just refuse. I'm like, I'm just going to make when I have work.
It's just like, it was really symbolic. I mean, several countries. It wasn't just the US. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That we ran for the toilet paper.
Yeah, I love that you pulled that in. And I'm definitely someone who sees the symbols everywhere. And I think it's really important to think about, right? It's like, oh, it's in the headlines. Oh, we're out of toilet paper everywhere. And it's like, if this is a global thing that's happening, let's pay attention. There was another thing that, I remember when the pandemic first hit, the highways, like the digital signs on the highways all said, stay home, stay safe, stay home.
Yeah.
And you were seeing it everywhere, which if I was venturing out into the world at all, it was so trippy to see that message.
Yeah.
And I remember, after seeing it for about a week, I went home and I really sat with that and really thought about and felt into stay home, stay safe. What is this telling us about how deeply we're being called to come back home? Home to our bodies, home to our own neighborhoods, home to the places where we live, to come back, because we've had, a century of so much progress and really rapid and progress by certain standards.
Yeah. A certain kind of progress.
So we need to unpack what that means.
Right? Barbaric on the other side, but really progress.
Exactly. And so I use that. Yes, exactly. So, this sort like capitalist progress, this like massive growth and expansion.
Yeah.
That has really, it's given us so much mobility and the ability to actually leave home. And I started to think and feel into how much of what we're seeing in the world right now is so deeply connected to how we jumped away from our own home base, from our own foundations. And what does it look like to start coming back to our own soils, coming back to our bodies, coming back to like, just even like local. Do you know your neighbors? Do you really know them?
One of the things that did happen for us here as the pandemic, we didn't know our neighbors, but now we know at least the closer ones nearby, that we started actually having, happy hour social distancing on Fridays. Well, now the fire we can't, but it was actually really lovely to meet some of our neighbors.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
What stood out to me, that's true, the home thing, so Cancerian, right? Stay home. Stay home. It was really eerie, of course, and we have to stay home. And now with the fires, we really have to stay home and keep the windows closed. I think there's perhaps a kind of an agitation within us. This, for some, going home is coming back to a skeleton.
Yeah.
There's no home. There's a house, but there's no home, the concept of home. The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about the stay home, I thought about this archaeologist. He was quoting somebody else, but his name is Neil Oliver. And so I'm paraphrasing here, but he said that human beings our emotional capabilities are kind of from caveman times. Our social structures are medieval, but our technology is futuristic.
Currently. I just got chills when you said that.
So in my mind, I think I wrote this in one of my posts, was that it's like we're kind of like a 12-year-old boy with an AK-47, trigger happy,
Yeah.
And it's dangerous because while technology is wonderful, we're able to have this conversation right now through technology. And I think technology helped us immensely navigate the pandemic in many ways. It is also without a sense of true self and understanding and self-knowledge. We are like that kid with the AK-47 with technology. There's no moral compass in what's happening, right? Yeah. And so I do think 2020 has been, of course, for the books and a watershed year for us collectively. When I talked about, I gave a couple of talks late last year about this year, and people asked me, well, sort of summarize it. And I did it in one word. I said, it's going to be about endurance. And now I kind of like, oh, Vanessa, why did you say that? It really is about endurance. It is about the essentials. There's your Capricorn, right? Get back to the essence. Get back home. What do you really, really need? And you can only do that when you know yourself a bit better.
Yeah.
So you're not like, I want all the things. We don't need all the things.
Yeah. So I have a question before I go there. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm just sort of, I loved what you said about it's like children with AK-47s. And then the comment you made even prior to that about, the post you wanted to make on Facebook and you decided to pause. And that's been a similar, I think especially as someone who, I guide leaders and I have somewhat of a public presence, I think especially, I have a teacher role. I definitely have the teacher. And so, I'm constantly like, should I post this, post this, should I not post this? And I think I've leaned way more to the reaction that you've had or the response that you've had of like, is this really necessary right now? And I'm finding that when I feel that urgency of, oh, let's do this, but I got to do this, I need to share this, people need to know, I feel young. In the moment, I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
If I do give myself a moment to just pause and be like, okay, do I actually need to do this? And I reflect back, I'm like, oh, I was feeling the child in me really like yelling, almost having a tantrum, being like, I got this out. It's the child that's leading, and not like the sacred child that's like bringing
Not the sacred child at all. This is the tantrum child.
Exactly. It's the like traumatized child who's like coming forward and being like, we have to, that's in a tantrum. And then when I give myself that time to pause, even, these fires are just, like you said, the Corvettes speeding by, right? Like,
Yeah.
fire speeding, the fire literally like growing at an exponential rate than it did it initially, And so to watch that, the amount of like reaction that just naturally comes, but because it feels so devastating, and it feel like it really triggers that child that just wants to break down in me initially. But every time, if I like give myself the time to pause and breathe and do some sort of slow practice, I find that a different, like that, that more ancient part of myself is able to come in and, navigate the situation with more root and more ground. And so, I want to hear what you're going to say, but I also have a question.
No, finish. Yeah.
So thanks for letting me, talk about that for a moment. So I guess like I want to share that because it brings me to my question of, you're an astrologer and you're a brilliant astrologer. And I'm curious, and you're an archetypal astrologer. So I'm curious about what are some of the archetypes that we can reach for and that are here to help us right now, to help the child like hold themselves up, so we can reach into the sacred child and also let the sage in us rise more.
Yeah, that's a good question. So as you were saying, I got excited. So it's the Gemini in me. I get excited. You're talking about the fires. Of course, in astrology, we deal with the elements, the 4 elements. But one of the things that I was thinking about it on the fires is that we had this crazy sort of windstorm that sort of really just fanned the fires, even further. And in astrology, fire is both, of course, destructive, but also is what gives us the inspiration, right? The fire in the belly, right? That kind of situation. And the air is the air signs of one, I would say, is Gemini is one of them. And I think our culture really leads with the shadow side of Gemini. Not just one of them, but of course all the others, but we can see it really clearly, the shadow side of Gemini, from our president to the social media, the way we engage with it. And so fire can really, just fuel the flames, right? And of course, if you're trying to make a campfire in a safe way, you do need a little bit of air to make the fire grow. As in life, we need sometimes a good sounding board with a friend or a mentor or a coach or whatever to help us get our fire even stronger so we can do what we want to do. You need that air. You need air in the mind. You need air to bring in different ideas. So things move, and so wind carries the pollen of different ideas. So, but with the fires, we saw the danger of too much air fueling this fire that is destructive. And if we think about our social discourse, the fracture, it's way too much air, too easy. Boom, share the button, gone. What does it serve? And here we are on the West Coast right now praying for rain. And if you think about the element of water, well, water, of course, can flood everything and be too much, so as the same way we flood with emotions, and then we can't do anything. We can't think rationally, right? Because you're driven by the fear or the whatever it may be. But also water is a saving grace. Right? We need the water to calm down. So for an example, as you were saying, you have all these Cancer planets. The gift of that is the ability with water, I think, to witness and to connect through the feelings and say, I feel you, right? And I think a lot of this, as we say in Brazil, running around with as a headless chicken, or as they also say in Brazil, with your skirt over your head, you know, that we are seeing in our society is a lack of an ability to fully witness and be like, I feel you. We're trying to bring in all this air and saying, I'm going to show you through facts, which is great, but facts does not convert a heart. You need a story, which involves bringing in the other elements. You need that fire to inspire. You need the water to feel like, oh, you know, when you watch a good movie and you feel the character. But you also need earth. You need a grounding. So I might be running away from your question or not, so bring me back in. But I was thinking about the astrology of this year on the emphasis on Capricorn, the trifecta of, you know, the big heavy hitters in Capricorn.
Can I pause you for a second? Because you mentioned Capricorn earlier. Could you give just a quick little, like, where is Capricorn in our world right now?
So Capricorn is the last of the earth signs. So we have Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. The opposite complementary sign, because all the signs have their opposite complementary, is Cancer. And Capricorn is earth, Cancer is water. So right here, you're going to see the push and pull. Capricorn, in its essence, I would say, its gift, it wants to build something. It wants to leave a legacy. It wants to say, see that? I built that. I made that. It needs to master. It's about mastery. It needs to climb the metaphorical mountain and be like, I did it. I mastered the technique. I mastered myself. I faced my shadow. That's Capricorn. Capricorn is also, it's quite interesting, and astrologically speaking, has kind of taken this, in many ways, if you see the memes of Capricorn, it looks like the business Wall Street guy. But it's a yin sign as well. It's considered a feminine sign. I know that things are changing now, but there's a sense each sign carries this polarity of feminine, masculine. And if you think about feminine, masculine as a dimension, not a gender situation here. Capricorn as earth, it's feminine. It wants to have foundation and structure. It's important to have it. It wants to go deep, not stay on the surface, because it's building legacy. Whatever it's building, it wants to last the test of time. So that's why I think it got sort of corrupted in a way into this, like it's the Wall Street ambitious climbing the corporate ladder, but it's not, that's not all of it, you know? And when I talked about earlier, late last year, about 2020, I said one of the figures that kind of called me to look at Capricorn from a different angle is the Celtic idea of the sovereign, lady sovereignty, the goddess of the land. That's also Capricorn. The idea of sovereignty, the idea of I am a master, I am the author of my life. I leave home, I leave Cancer, right? I leave the comfort, the confines of my home, so I can make something of myself out in the world. And what I do in the world, because all earth signs have this, will serve the world, right? So all the signs, and as of course all the planets, they have the dance between, you know, this is, if you will, good, this is kind of more challenging. They all have the crunchy bits. But also an important element about Capricorn, which I think is very much the signature of 2020, is about you have to mature. It is the sign that it rules age, old age. And as we see in our government, we have a lot of old age. We have no elders. And that's another point that I think about Capricorn, the strong signature, because this signature is not going to last just 2020. Because when planets come together, it's like a new moon. It starts a cycle. And these are long cycles. And so it's about whatever's being planted, it goes down to the bones. That's another Capricorn Saturn combination. Saturn is the planet that rules Capricorn, which is often portrayed as the old man. So there's something about the wisdom of age and the need to elder. So these are signatures of the time as well. Now, on the shadow side, there is this sense, because of the combination of planets that are in Capricorn currently, so it's Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, there is a sense of a dire sense of death, of the end, impending end. It's over, right? And we hear this everywhere, from every sphere, right? And which generates as well a whole lot of fear. You know, so also the shadow side of all this is fear. And when we are in fear of death, which is, to me, kind of boils it all down, so that's our human story. While we act in irrational ways, you know, we can become more clannish, right? So that's kind of, what was the question again?
I'll summarize. We have a quick question. So how long is this Capricornian influence with us?
So
without, I mean, I think going into this
the trifecta that I'm calling is when the planets come together.
Yeah.
Which kind of is a new moon moment, in a sense it's planting a seed. So the seed is planted.
Okay.
Later this year in December, Saturn, who is the planet that rules Capricorn, moves into Aquarius.
Yeah.
And just before that, Jupiter also moves into Aquarius. And they come together in Aquarius on the solstice of this year, which starts another cycle. But it's in Aquarius. At least it's not in Capricorn. So I think there is if you will, a breath of fresh air coming, because now we shift into air, more air. We're not so big on the Earth moment. Pluto still stays in Capricorn because it's very slow moving. But I would say that looking at how the planets are moving, by the mid-20s, 2024, 25, there will be a lot of shifts of planets moving to different signs, especially Pluto, because Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. And this is the equivalent of gutting out your kitchen down to the pipes. And we've been doing it since 2008. But the intensity came on with the last couple of years, with Saturn arriving in Capricorn. And then Jupiter arrived in Capricorn as well at the end of last year. And now it's like, we really found that some of our pipes are extremely broken. We gotta have to dig in deeper. So it's kind of the equivalent. The zeitgeist has been this sort of,
right.
We're gutting out the kitchen.
Yeah. So just to repeat the question, you answered it beautifully, by the way. Even if you forgot it. Just to remind you.
It's bourbon inside here.
Just to remind you and everyone else, the question was, what are the archetypal influences and astrological influences that can help us?
Okay, help us. Okay. I lay down the problem. Let's go for help now.
Yeah. But I think you actually did. I mean, let's keep digging into it. But I just want to take a moment to reflect back to what I heard you say.
It's good.
You know, I think you shared a lot, and I'd love us to soak it in.
So, like with anything, like I was saying, with astrology, you look at all sides. It's not just one thing. You have to kind of, see. Of course, really, if you want to get down to the individual level, you have to look at how all these transits, right, how it plays out in your own birth chart. So that's one disclaimer to see, okay, how can I really do this? But collectively, I think it's about one, maturing. You know, it really is a crisis of maturation. Because earlier we were talking about how we just sort of want to progress. That is very, on one hand, is very youthful thinking. It's always going to be great, right? And beautiful. I'm always going to love this. There's something about as you grow older that you understand that, well, no, some things are more essential and more important. I don't need to have everything, right? So you start honing in. And I think one of the ways that this year has asked us this question again and again, as you said, go home. What is really the foundation of your life? And if it isn't working for you, okay, so what are you going to do? Right? So that's why we're hearing so many divorces and all that. But a lot of people coming to a realization of like, you know what, I didn't really like that job. Right? I want to do something more. So there's a calling, whenever it's back to the idea of Capricorn and all this, especially Saturn, is come back down to the bones of something, the structure of something. You cannot just keep putting on the makeup on something if it has no foundation. And in our culture, we're extremely attracted by everything that is epic, wonderful, big, new, updated, fast. And there's been a whole grinding to say, you're forgetting things, right? So I think archetypally, the way to do things, one of the ways that I connected with at least, is that how can I work on the foundations of my life? Where in my life do I really need to have, as they say, a come to Jesus moment and mature? And face that if I really want to climb that mountain of my ideas and dreams, I need to devote myself. I need discipline, which to me is a form of devotion. I need to create the containers that will receive, make room for whatever I want to receive, right? So it's as simple as, I want to be a better student. Well, I got to clear my desk so I can have time to sit at my desk and study. So I think the archetypal it's a way, it's really teaching us how to realign ourselves with a sense of devotion to something, to the work at hand. Capricorn is also a big emphasis on the work. You know, so I think that's why a lot of people being like, I want to be a better leader. How do I work differently? How can I, and how much chaos has caused to so many companies, right? But a lot of people have discovered that, hey, some of these things were inflated. We really don't need them. Let's get down to basic. So I think that in essence, it's about how can we mature rather than find the fastest, quickest solution. Not that they won't exist. It shouldn't be the way we want to necessarily approach. There's a sense of gravitas. You gotta be serious about something. And this is where, back to the golden child that we were talking about, the child, the inner child that is actually really inspirational. So an element that we see in our culture very prominently is the concept that is the senex and the puer, or the puella. And in our culture, the puer and the puella, meaning the young one, on one side is like, I want to live it up. I want to be free. I don't want to commit. I want to join. I'm following all my inspirations and not leaving a whole lot of wreckage behind, but going with the flow. I want things. That's kind of gone a little too much. The positive side of that puer, puella, it keeps us inspired. It keeps us like curious. and it doesn't keep us stuck. The senex is the old one. But one side, funny enough, the word senex is what creates the word senator. So just look at the Senate and you will see this. So the senex is, on the shadow side, it can be grouchy, and I will not give you power. I will eat you, and I will keep myself in power because I don't believe in your youthful, dreams or whatever. I'm killing it. That's old, right? But the wise side of the senex is, I will mentor the youth. I will work with the poor. That could be both externally in the world, but also internally. We all have these archetypes within us.
Yeah.
So when you're working with leaders, you will meet that archetype that wants to say, no, it's my way. I will not have a succession plan or whatever it is. Or a leader who says, no, I'm going to mentor those who are coming in. Yeah. Right? So.
Yeah, totally. Ooh. Well, and I love that because it also, like you said, the archetypes live inside of us too. And I know for myself as a leader and with the leaders that I work with, that like the shadowy senator, or sorry, what was the
senex?
That shadowy side is so prevalent, just because of the way we've been conditioned to be leaders, as well as that like young self. And so I find that, with so much of the work that I'm doing, both with myself and with others, is moving us into the place of how can we mentor ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
How can we mentor? How can we move into the sacred version of that elder, and then the young child, so that there is this mentorship cycle happening.
Yeah.
And I find that when you connect the two and you move into the more sacred version of them, or I hate using the word sacred, but
yeah,
just more the exalted version of them, that it like creates this loop that almost becomes a container.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have that container kind of woven around you inside of your own system, you can fall apart.
Yeah.
You fall apart when you need to, and you're not afraid of it. And I know for myself that, just in the last several months, also after having done this work for such a long time now, the pull to just let it all go and crumble or whatever, like a little child. When that happens, or when I feel the pull, it's a lot easier to go there. And when I go there, I find that it's almost like I do collapse onto the ground, but it's not this like collapse that I felt in times where I felt like a victim. It's this collapse. It's basically like a return
mm-hmm.
back. I feel like I'm falling, and I'm returning back to the earth.
There's a surrender, right?
Yeah, and it really does feel nourishing.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like I've fallen onto like cool soil, and they're holding me, and that feels like that older version or older part of me that's sitting there with me and holding me, in the surrender. And it allows me to go even deeper with it, because I know it's it is actually serving me being able to get up with more resilience. And
yeah.
And it's back and forth, and it's been a really beautiful process. So I'm just remembering that as, and it's been really beautiful guiding that and holding that also with the other leaders that I work with, and how powerful, I just feel so much tenderness inside my heart as you describe that process.
Yeah. And it's the way in which the signs work together.
Yeah.
Capricorn needs Cancer, the waters of Cancer, to keep it moist, to keep it still connected to the waters of imagination and creativity. Yeah. And so I really feel that the biggest crisis we actually do have is a crisis of imagination. Not pie in the sky, but really a connection with the imaginal world.
Yeah.
How do we interact with these archetypes? That's at least the language I use and the way I frame them, but you can take it in any other way you want. But how do we speak to the world speaks to us. We just don't know the language. We've forgotten the language. But, if you see symbols and things, it's the world speaking to you. And I think it starts, at least from an astrological standpoint, I feel like it behooves us to understand our birth chart, because that's our roadmap. That's our country, our cosmic country, and we are the ambassador. So that's why knowing yourself better is a way to be a better ambassador of your portal into the larger world.
Yeah.
You're the guardian of a certain entrance.
Yeah.
And you should, I think it's part of our work to be a good ambassador. So we understand that, as well as we approach the others. And I think the crisis in nature, when we think about the fires, for example, is like, what is being said? And how can we work with that? So I think we are, like, back to what I was saying, it's really about how do we mature as a civilization, as a culture. And the old ways need to die, but it's painful, it's unraveling, it raises a lot of fear as well. It's natural.
Yeah, there was something about earlier when you were talking about, well, I just want to go back and remind us all that, when I first asked the question about what are the archetypes and how is astrology helpful at this time in our growing up. And, I loved how you went through each of the elements. And that's so much of what my work is about. It's about, how do we surrender to the stars and the seasons, to the earth, as a guide of how we show up as regenerative leaders at this time. And so I love how in our conversation, it's so natural. It's like when we think about, how can we support ourselves right now? It's so natural to go to the idea of earth, like the elements of the earth holding us. And then you mentioned also in that description, you mentioned with water and, that water calls us to like listen to so we can penetrate. I think I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but
okay.
I felt like this is what I was feeling through your message, Also, as a lot of water in my chart, like I'm in the water, I think, at least. But yeah, what I was hearing you say was, like the water in us is asking us to listen more. And it just made me, as you said that, I was like, oh, wow, it's so interesting how so many of us continue to look for solutions in the answer. And what if right now what we're really being asked to do is to witness that the answers aren't there right now, I know we've shared some really beautiful things here that I don't want to like say isn't useful, but I think we're still trying to grasp for an answer that hasn't, or not an answer, a way that hasn't revealed itself, because we're not listening. We're not witnessing. Use the word witness. And that really hit me. And again, and I'll go back to just the visceral experience I have in my work. The moments when it's the most powerful and the most transformative is when I'm deeply witnessing. And there's like nothing, I'm witnessing and holding in a way that the people, the group I'm working with can then also witness and feel themselves. And something, we don't even have to name it.
Yeah.
We don't even have to put it on paper. We don't even have to say, we solved it, here's the answer. It's so palpable in the room. Something shifts, and then we are anew. And we're moving and thinking and feeling in a different way.
And the resistance falls, right? The resistance is about the witness. Like a psychological tantrum, right? Like, I'm going to resist until you see me, right? And so to me, one of the things I hate selfies. I don't know how to do it. I don't like them.
I do too.
But one of the things that fascinates me about the selfie is, why are we constantly turning the camera to ourselves? And to me, it's like we're asking to be witnessed. Look at me, see me, right? And the way I approach astrology and the way it has informed my life is that it's a methodology of life. We're not just the sun sign here, whatever sign you are. You have a whole host of planets, a whole combination. But even if you don't have anything in a certain sign, that sign still has a place in an aspect of your life. And I think when we notice, we're talking about rhythm, right? The idea of rhythm, which is also another thing that this year especially drove home, right? Because we were staying home so much. Rhythm to me is when we are aligned with the ebb and flow of things as they move, right? We eat, if you will, try to eat the foods of the season kind of thing. But each of the signs of the 12 signs, one leads into the other. They need each other. They're not separate. You can't have a Virgo without the Leo, and you can't have the Libra without Virgo. Another way that we see more and more people doing this is there's a lot of interest in learning about the lunar phases, working with your creative flow through the lunar phases. That's a very sort of practical way to kind of get into rhythm and discover your own rhythm. And the other one I invite people to notice is, you don't have to know a lot of astrology to do this, but as you know where the sun is in whatever sign it is, notice what you're called to do, what do you want to do, what kinds of things rise for you around you, conversations and such. That is a way to get into rhythm. And I think that is also a way, two reasons. One, it takes away astrology for just being up there, kind of this esoteric thing, it brings it down here, but also allows us to, at a very personal level, align ourselves into rhythm with the bigger forces that are interwoven with our world. And I think it's, to me, it's very helpful to, it combines that sense of witnessing with the wanting to understand. It's like the witnessing, like I was saying, maybe the water element is the, like, I witness, I feel you. But air is still around and saying, I want to understand, open my mind, give me an insight. And all that kind of fuels our fire to keep going, our vitality, which also allows us to make things in the physical world, Earth. That's kind of how I see it.
Beautiful.
So
I love that. The rhythm of all the elements.
Yeah.
I love how you are talking about, you're giving voice to all the elements. Whereas I think in a lot of what we see in our world right now is, a very myopic voice of one area or two versus what's the interaction between all of them, so that we're working with more wholeness.
Yeah. And you have to try to bring those elements into your life, actually your physical life, because we also have sometimes an imbalance of elements, right? We have more than one of the other. And we have to find ways to bring that element in more consciously into our lives as a way to learn more about that element.
So I have a thought. I feel like our conversation, I'm sure we could keep going on and don't overwhelm people too much. So as we close, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about what's an area where you feel like, I'd throw that question back at you, or send it back to you of, where's an area in your life as a leader, as a person in this world right now, where you feel some of that imbalance, and how do you bring it into your life?
For me, I've been, finding ways to be consistent and devotional, like really show up for the work. I feel that if the muses are coming, I need to make room for them. So I try to be as disciplined as I can be and devotion in what I'm trying to do, even when, at times it feels like it's going nowhere. It's just like laying down the bricks, like when you're trying to build a high rise and you're just digging the hole, nothing is showing up above the surface. Sometimes it feels like that. And for me personally, I don't have barely any fire in my chart. So I have to find creative ways to bring in fire for myself. And fire also has to do with faith and trust. So for me, that's definitely a growing edge for myself. And to me, so that way, the discipline is a way for me to, as I often say, I believe in God, but I also believe in tying up my horse. And so for me, the devotion and the discipline is a way to say, okay, God, here I am. I'm sure enough. I'm sitting in front of the blank page here. I am ready for the muses. And so for me, it's a way to tend to that fire as best as I can. So that's a growing edge for myself and how I try to show up. And that actually informs a lot of my work with people. I meet a lot of clients. I do a lot with clients who are on the threshold. They want to align, have a more fulfilling livelihood, align their sole purpose with their livelihood. And I meet a lot of people who have wonderful ideas. It's amazing, but very little grounding.
Yeah.
And they want to be leaders, but they haven't, they have the alignment, but they're not carrying water, chopping wood here. And I find that's really important to work with those two. So it informs my work in saying, look, great, I see you. This is beautiful. I want you to birth this baby. Let's create the container and keep the hearth, the fire going, even through the drudgery sometimes. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Is there something that you find that or maybe it's multiple things, but what are some of the things that really help bring that fire to your life, that help you have that faith?
Stories inspire me. I really like not just mythology, which I work a lot with, but I like origin stories. I like how people start things. And I love to hear inspiring stories where there is a sense of transformation. And that's one of my biggest criticism to the entertainment industry. Whether or not, but a story that shows me a realization of like, oh, I was doing this totally wrong and whatever, and then they shift. That gives me hope in humanity. That gives me a sense of faith. So I just love hearing people's stories. How are they doing? Because they're the walking archetypes, right? And so I want to see how they're navigating the world. To me, that's it keeps me going. Gives me a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, beautiful. And would you like to share anything about your work or anything that you're offering to help others come into their own maturation during this time?
Well, I do astrology sessions. I work with what I call them creative mystics who want to really, they're their threshold, like, I want to do my purpose, but I want to do a livelihood as well. So I have my astrology sessions, but one of the things I offer classes. I have several classes coming up. But another thing I do is every month around the new moon, I have my new moon salons. And in that, we explore the myth around the sign of that new moon, but also the themes of the new moon in ways in which we can honor that new moon. And so I had one just yesterday for the new moon today, but everything is on my website, and those are really fun. That's a way to kind of create a sense of learning and community with, falling into alignment with the moon. And I'm on social media, and I read a lot about the moon as well.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I took one of your moon classes a while back, and I had to listen to it afterwards. I just but I also am signed up on your newsletter, and I just want to let everyone know. I just love how you write and how clear you both take, the beautiful stories of our world and the mythologies and the archetypes of our world, and you really break them down in clear ways so we can digest it and apply it in our own lives. And I'm just really grateful for your leadership in that.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is a breath of fresh air and a grounding force in this time. And so I encourage anyone to head over to Vanessa's website and sign up for the newsletter for a class.
Yeah. And I'm doing I'm halfway through a series about Mars. It's been really interesting working with Mars. We all are in Mars course right now.
I wish that we had started with that and talked about that this whole time. What happened was just great.
Mars.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vanessa, and thank you everyone for listening in.
Thank you.
Season leader, this season leader interview. If you were interested in any of the concepts that came up in your own maturation as a leader inside of yourself, and how to use the earth and embody the earth and its wisdom and lessons in the process of maturing as a leader, so we can really be resilient. Take a look at my website. I have an upcoming cohort that is now live, and we'll also be offering classes and some sessions to help us all hopefully just be a guide in all the growing up. That
a whole lot of growing up. Yeah, we need a lot of guides.
Yeah. Well, and one more thing before I head off, that I just want to say, I love that we're having this conversation now as we're moving into fall, which is, the story and the mythology and the feeling, and in Chinese medicine, the wisdom around the autumn season is so much about returning to foundations, returning to our original soils, and rebuilding them from the ground up, so that we can come back to a place of balance, and we can grow in the springtime in a regenerative way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll definitely be writing more about that and really delving into that in the offerings that come from now on. And I'm just so grateful that we got to touch so much on that return to earth and that Capricornian energy during our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Many breaths and earth and water and air and sustainable fire to all of you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.